This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Good morning and welcome to the Monday Morning Break with me, Marie. I'm really looking forward to being joined by Matt Holman this morning to talk about neurodiversity.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
So good morning to everyone on this slightly grey Monday morning here. But as I said, really looking forward to talking to Matt this morning about neurodiversity. Good morning, Matt, and thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Marie. I hope you can hear me okay.
Yep, perfect
Excellent.
connection.
Good. It's Monday as well, right? So who knows what we're going to get.
I know, exactly. That couldn't have gone any better.
Brilliant. Good.
So how are you?
I'm doing all right, thank you. Yeah, I had a really nice restful weekend, let's say.
Lovely.
Doing all the nice things that I enjoy doing. So I feel good today. It's Monday, of course, start of a new week.
Yep, exactly. And what a week it's going to be.
Indeed.
Yeah. So, we're going to talk about neurodiversity, a subject I know that is very close to both of our hearts. I just thought, shall we just get into it and start talking?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, the first thing I think I wanted to talk about was just some of the statistics, and some of the numbers and things that we're now seeing. I mean, this is it's a lot more people than I think people realise, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I think so, and I think we're sort of unveiling the reality now, aren't we? Now that we're talking about this more often. And that's something that I think is a really positive movement as well. So I think that's something to sort of share up front. The statistics are showing, some challenges, and especially when we're thinking about younger people's sort of issues or challenges, let's say, because I don't really like the word issues, but challenges around, the struggles that they might be experiencing as well. But, as we unveil things, that's what I always think of, is as we're unveiling it, we're sort of seeing the reality and the truth.
Absolutely. And I think, yes, I know there's sometimes there's thoughts, isn't there, or people put things out there about these rising numbers.
Yeah.
I mean, but I know for me, I do believe it is to do with more knowledge, more research, more understanding about the differences.
Yeah, I think so, and I think if I look at myself and my awareness of neurodiversity up until only recent history, really, because I've got two daughters, both with neurodiversity. So my eldest daughter's she's going to be 22 this year. She was diagnosed with autism when she turned 18, and my youngest daughter's going to be 17 this year. She was diagnosed with autism just before she became 16. So we'd lived for all these years without really any awareness of what neurodiversity was. The fact that we had two young people living with us for all those years, living with neurodiversity. And I think that's what we're seeing now around us. And I don't know about you, Marie, with the work that you do as well, but we're seeing there's a lot of families that all of a sudden there's a sort of like later revelation when our children become sort of teen years.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, looking at some of the literature and the research that's come out, it's saying neurodiversity refers to diversity in the human brain and cognition. So social, learning, attention, mood, and all those other sort of mental functions, and a range of differences in individual brain function and behavioural traits. I mean, I'm the same, neurodiverse, and perhaps to me, it just made a lot of things make a lot of sense. So all those things, and then possibly shared by your daughters and you as a parent, a lot of things I thought, oh, okay, that wasn't my fault, or not, but also that realization, okay, not everyone feels that way or thinks that way. That sort of thing is, to me, it's a good thing, to know.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, there's a huge range of things, isn't there, that comes under neurodiversity.
Mm.
But yeah, I think sometimes that you can have a lot of confusion growing up.
Yeah.
Um,
And I
when
think that's it, isn't it? It's the confusion and not knowing, and until we got to that point with the diagnosis of our eldest daughter was the one who has struggled the most really with that. And, the biggest challenge with her has been her mental health connecting to her neurodiversity as well.
Yes.
And if, her mental health started to change when she was 15, she wasn't diagnosed with autism until she was 18. So
Mm,
there's a big lapse in time between the diagnosis for her neurodiversity and then obviously her development of a serious mental health challenge with an eating disorder in particular, which in another part of the conversation around sort of autism and connecting it to eating. That's a whole conversation in itself, really, and one that we often advise, or not advise, but we often encourage parents to look at when their child starts to change their behaviours around food
mm,
and the way they control. But so my sort of understanding and awareness of neurodiversity, back to the original very first question, is it only really started when it needed to happen, when we needed to have that.
yeah.
And the thing about the variation of neurodiversity, of course, there's many different varieties and types of people, but we're all unique, right? We're all on
Mm.
our own journey. We've all had our own life experiences, and I think that's half the challenge for people, isn't it? Because we're expected to perform and live in a neurotypical world, which isn't designed to help and support us with some of the challenges we might have sensory and so on. So yeah, there's so many topics in here, isn't there?
There is absolutely, and I know it's something that we share, this view and this message that um, accommodations, and I'm
Mm.
saying sort of in inverted commas,
Yeah.
are benefit everyone. Like, you don't have
Mm.
to be neurodiverse for it to benefit from,
No.
some making things a little more inclusive, and
Yeah.
just having that bit more knowledge, I think, about things. I mean, like you said,
Mm.
there's so many aspects to it. There's
Mm.
sensory, there's organization, there's
Mm.
emotional responses, and I believe as well, the more we know, the better.
Yeah. And I've got this thing that I say, when I'm out chatting to people about these topics, and I'm like, let's design things neurodiverse first.
Yes.
Because if we design things with the mind of somebody that might struggle, so why don't we look at it in that perspective, look at it using that lens? So what could make me struggle in this environment? So it might be the noise, it might be the sound, the sounds and the smells and the
Mm,
the textures, and we don't often appreciate that those things bring about their own challenges for people with neurodiversity. I didn't know that until my daughter started to educate me around things like textures and
yeah.
touch, and so she would be, and she just told me recently actually, and this is just she's writing a book herself about her autism journey, because it's almost like a diary sort of view from her perspective, which I think is fantastic. But what she told me through that media is, she allowed me to read some of it, was that when she was touched on the arm. So she was at school, and the example she gave was she was at school and somebody just brushed past her arm, and
Mm,
she physically felt like that person had assaulted her. And of course, they hadn't, but they just literally brushed past her arm. And her reaction was one of pain to the feeling that she'd been attacked by somebody. And throughout her journey, we've seen those sort of moments where you sort of, you just touch her arm or her shoulder, and she'll just react in a very, in a different way, than what we would expect or think that would be a normal reaction. So that thing about neurodiverse first, I think sometimes what we need to do is understand from people with those neurodiversities what it is that we could do to change those environments. And talking to that, it's almost about creating spaces that actually everybody could use. So that quiet space stuff is not just for people who struggle with sound and noise. It's
mm.
also for people that just have a lot going on in their lives. Their brain's overactivated, and they're struggling to get peace. Give them
Yeah.
space. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've said it before as well, that building in a quiet space, if you're thinking about workplaces or education or something, building in a quiet space, I mean, who doesn't want that? Like,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
you've just had a really busy, you've had a really busy morning, or you've had a
Mm.
difficult conversation to have, or
Yeah.
you're overwhelmed with the number of emails pinging through your inbox. Who
Yeah.
wouldn't then want to go and take 10 minutes in a lovely, quiet, calming
Mm.
space place and just reset. You know, that those are the kind of things, aren't they? That's going to benefit everyone.
Oh, definitely. I think it'd be interesting to know, and for anybody that's listening to this as well, is ask yourself that question: would you prefer to work in a quiet space where it's more calm and peaceful, or would you prefer to work in a space that's noisy, loud, overwhelming, overbearing, and
Mm.
your ability to concentrate is really limited? That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and it just brings us on, doesn't it, about thinking
Mm.
about the environments. I mean,
Yes.
we've touched on sort of workplace environments,
Yep.
um, and I know there's a lot. You know, there's been some amazing shows on Teachers Talk Radio as well about
Mm.
neurodiverse educators. You know, and
Yep.
how how you work in an education environment. But it's young people, children, and young people as well, isn't it? When I
Mm.
think of some school environments that I've seen. Just the that must just be so difficult, I think, for
Oh,
anyone with
And
neurodiversity.
as and it's interesting, isn't it? Because you say that along lines, the statistics, looking at
Mm,
the number of young people in classes, was it's about one in six, 1 in 7 young people potentially with the neurodiverse challenges and mental health challenges, and yet we're still seeing, the lack of support in those environments to help
mm,
those young people. And neurodiversity is a condition from birth, right? So it's not that it's not an illness.
no,
It's just developmental. So, albeit you might not see it until a little bit later, but it is that reality, isn't it? So we struggle to sort of create those environments for younger people, especially with overcrowding classrooms. With
mm,
multiple children in, and the support is very limited, of course, for young people there. So,
yeah. The one that pops into my mind is
mm,
corridors, and
yeah,
moving between classrooms and break time and lunchtime and that
yeah,
that rush and so many people all in one space. I mean, we quite often hear, don't you, that children can cope really very well in
mm,
infant and junior school, and then they move to secondary school, and then
mm,
that you really see it. And I think probably, some of it is to do with the actual physical environment,
mm,
and that change. Next room, different teacher,
yep,
and all the noise and smells and things like you said. So
mm,
yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot to think about in terms of how these things could be
mm,
addressed both in education and in school. Um, and I know the
definitely,
other one that we've talked about as well is in the mental health support. Like you said, there's
mm,
a big link, isn't there, um,
yeah,
between neurodiversity and mental health. Um, and actually, I think it's coming out more, isn't it? I mean, particularly with eating disorders and things
yeah,
like that. The treatment or the way of sort of unpicking what's going on is very different when there's that comorbidity.
yes. Yeah, and the service structures around that as well is very limited. Because what we found, especially through the journey with our daughter in a mental health and neurodiversity, is primary care is focusing on the mental illness.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have an appreciation. And I could share so many stories of the service and the challenges that we've experienced. And I don't mean any harm by that in terms of the people. It's more about the way it's structured at the moment, which it doesn't take into consideration the underlying neurodiversity. So my daughter's autism, when she was going through her experiences with her eating disorder, wasn't really taken into consideration. It was, so it wasn't consultative meal planning with her. It was just, these are the things you should eat, these are the things you should do, this is the way you should live your life. And she really struggled with that because she wasn't in control.
Yes, well, exactly. Yes, yeah, and these kind of myths, I suppose, isn't it?
Mm,
Around, again, talking about an eating disorder,
yeah.
about the myths of the reason why, and body image and things like that. And I believe I'm right. I'm right in saying that that's not quite the case when somebody's autistic as well.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we just had the Eating Disorders Awareness Week, and we talked a bit about ARFID and talking
Mm,
about alternatives to things like anorexia. Now, my daughter primarily had all the symptoms and signs and behaviours of anorexia. So the weight loss and the purging and the way that she engaged with food, the social disconnection that she brought about. She created that herself. Didn't see it coming, but now as we sort of rolled through those years since she was 15, she's now going to be 22, as I said earlier.
mm,
We sort of recognize that actually the behavior around food isn't about anorexia, so to speak. It's more just about the controlling part. So
yeah.
when we can see when her anxiety is peaking, she changes her behavior with food. Now that could be both ways as well. So that could be she eats less or she eats more. So she has this relationship, which I think is where a lot of parents struggle, actually. And I've seen that, as I said a little bit earlier, with,
Mm.
we've spoken to a number of parents who come to us because obviously we've lived through an experience and we're very open and share it. And my daughters know that we talk about their journeys because they want to help people, right? And
Yeah.
that's ultimately what we all want to do, because that's why we do what we do, Marie, and we love this topic. And whether it's mental health, neurodiversity, young people, education system. But what's important is always to sort of put into frame a question that people probably aren't asking themselves. So when people have come to us and said, "Oh, my teen daughter's struggling to eat. They're showing me some behaviours I'm really concerned about. They're going into some level of, pre-crisis, I guess is probably the best way to determine it. They're not quite in crisis, but you can see how quickly it could happen."
Yeah.
First question we ask is, have you ever considered that they might have neurodiversity? And I'll be honest with you, the reaction's always quite one of surprise.
Mm.
Why? Why would we think they've got neurodiversity? And then we'll explain and we'll say, well, look, if we knew that our daughter had neurodiversity 3 years before she had an eating disorder develop, I think we could have perhaps changed that deviation a little bit. And so
Yeah.
at that point, they're going, okay, so tell me more. And then I'll explain to them, okay, were there certain behaviors present in your child, when they were growing up? How did they react? How did they socialize? What sort of connections did they make? Did they have, certain sort of dynamics in their friendship group, or did they struggle to make friends? Did they develop well? Did they talk early? Did they talk late? Did they? And so as I start to unveil all of these sort of questions, I guess is probably the best thing to say. They would then start sort of almost checking those boxes mentally and say, do you know what? That sounds just like my daughter. We've had that so many times where it's that almost light bulb moment of never even thought about that.
Yeah. And I think as well, isn't it, the way that you can help and support other people to see that, because quite often, I think from the other side, you don't necessarily know that your thinking's different.
No, no, you
Because
don't. No.
you don't ask anyone, or come about it that you're learning about it, and then you go, oh gosh,
Yeah.
like I said, that moment you think, oh, okay, not everyone does that.
No, and it's a basic level of awareness for everybody, whether it's the
Mm,
parent, the child, the person, whoever it is.
mm,
We just don't have that. And I always use this phrase, when I'm doing the things that I do, where I say, we only ever know what we need to know when we know that we need to know it, which is ultimately a point where we're at crisis or something's going wrong. That's technically what we're doing at the moment with the way we learn about topics like neurodiversity or mental health or whatever the conversation's about. And then we start to sort of unveil a bit of, you mentioned earlier something really important, actually, I hope we can go back to, which is about understanding ourselves.
yes, yeah.
And I think that's a big part of it.
It really is. It really, really is. I mean, like I was saying, it's just for me, I'm not speaking for everyone, but just for me personally, it helped because I
Mm,
thought, oh, okay, there is a reason,
mm,
um, and it's not, oh, it's not anything wrong. It's just different.
yeah,
And that sort of thing. But then just understanding, I think, more about it, and you think, you can look back and go, okay, that's why I react like that, or that's why I find that difficult. And it's, I think, to know yourself
mm,
is very valuable, really valuable, because then you
yeah,
can start to sort of almost plan or prepare for things, or just accommodate, again, there's that word, but
yeah,
accommodate things yourself. And I'm extremely lucky in the where I work, and my amazing CEO Cheryl, and things like that, and we can, because it's based on such trust
mm,
and an understanding and safety, we can work out things together that are going to make things better,
yeah,
um, for me and for work, so yeah, I think once you start to understand, um, start to look back at things, and like I said,
yeah.
there's almost a bit of a relief going, okay, all right, that's why that was particularly hard when I was younger, or
Mm.
that kind of thing, and then you can work with people to make things as good for you as you can.
I agree, yeah, and I think there's elements here, isn't there? Self-reflection, self-awareness, and learning more about yourself and having that ability to continue to learn about yourself. And I think, that's where I struggled. If I go backwards in time a little bit, to 2016, I had a sort of my own moment, pivotal moment where I lost my employment, very quickly, didn't see it coming. I struggled. But what I've done to change myself, that's at the point where you have two choices. I genuinely and honestly feel that, which is you either get up or you give up. And I decided to get up, and I wanted to do something with it. And not to say I wanted to go around and tell everybody it was all, I didn't want to put anybody into difficult positions with that, because I took responsibility. That was the difference. And I
Yeah.
took responsibility, but I also took ownership of my own journey. And I wanted to raise my awareness, raise my understanding, reflect on the past experiences, to use them as part of that education for me, because can't change what's past, right? We can't change what's happened. I can't change the fact that my daughter's diagnosis when she was 18 and not when she was 13 or 12. I can't change that. But what I can do is help change the future direction so that others can enable their relationship with themselves to happen sooner rather than later. And I've learned so much, Marie, through my daughters,
Yeah.
through my children. And I think as a parent, often we get to a point where we're like, well, we know it all because we're the parent and we're the person of authority. And gosh, we got to throw that one away, because I genuinely believe our children are teaching us so much more than we maybe even learned at school in many of these topics. And we just need to listen and tune in. And what my daughters have taught me is the ability to recognize when, my neurodiversity, albeit I don't have a diagnosis, and I don't run around telling people I have a diagnosis, but I definitely have ADHD, a lot of traits of ADHD, and the hereditary element of ADHD. My youngest daughter does have ADHD, of course, as I mentioned earlier, is certain behaviors and relationships and reactions. And I can even tell you, true story, even this morning I could feel when my triggering of my anxiety was playing into my feeling of rejection, which is part of the feelings within ADHD. I got an email that I wasn't happy with. I reacted with, my adrenaline started flowing. I got very agitated and very upset, and I become overly emotional. And
Yeah.
and it was literally like 10 minutes before we started this conversation. And I'm just going, okay, I need to take notice of it. I couldn't
Yeah.
pretend it hadn't happened. So literally on the phone to my assistant, right, I need to tell you something and I need to just offload. And she's going, just breathe, Matt, breathe. And because I know what's going on, I can
Yeah.
adjust for it. And that's the difference now. I don't
That
just ignore it and try to power through.
that's so interesting. And also, yeah, thank you then for still coming on and
It's all right, don't worry.
ready to talk about it, because that one I I really identify with, that rejection sensitivity.
Yes.
And that is one that I have learnt about fairly recently.
Yep.
And again, I've had a lot of support with that, mainly from Cheryl,
Mm.
my CEO, and and it was something that she mentioned. And when I looked at it, I was like, oh my gosh.
Yes.
And I recognized myself on a piece of paper. Sorry,
Yep.
excuse me. So that one, yes, I totally understand. But and I agree, it's that thing of knowing and
Yep.
having people around you that you can talk to who know,
Mm.
um, and then using a strategy or whatever works for you to bring yourself down. And my word that I hold on to is perspective,
Yes.
um, which, because when we're reacting emotionally, um, that's what I remind myself: perspective,
Yeah.
perspective.
And that's where it's useful to get this perspective of others, though, isn't it?
Yes.
Because if you get a singular piece of information, you will interpret it. It could be interpreted in multi different ways, right? So I always remember I got a band sent from the NHS, and just as an example, and it's this very silly thing, but it was a little sort of wristband, one of these, one of these things you put on your wrist, and it said, "Do I look like I care?" And I just thought, oh, that's really kind, because that was relating to being a carer for our daughter and so on. And I posted it on social, and the reaction was quite interesting, because somebody said, well, that's a bit out of order, isn't it? Or that's not
Oh,
appropriate. And I said, what do you mean? And they said, well, look, read it again. And you go, do I look like I care? And of course, you can interpret that in two ways. So one
yeah,
is, do I look like I care? I don't care. Who cares? And the
yeah,
other one was, do I look like I care? Being, do I look like I'm a carer? Because obviously we would not know who's caring for who in whatever relationships they have. And it was really fascinating, because I didn't read it the negative way. I read it the positive way, because obviously I knew what the context of the band was all about. But
yeah.
from somebody else outside reading that, they could have got quite disgruntled, right, and started, obviously we're in a world and a society where it's very quick to go onto social media and say you don't like something, and gone off on this pathway of, saying this is inappropriate and how dare they, and you can see how easy it could be to
Oh,
consume that.
definitely. As you were saying it, I thought, gosh, yes, you just, for you, oh, that's lovely.
Yep.
And it resonates, and it probably felt, really supportive.
Yep.
And you said you took a photo, posted it on social media, and I bet it just unleashed, didn't it?
Yeah, it got tempered down quite quickly, because then I gave context to why I was wearing it. I wasn't like, I'm walking around just saying I just don't care about anything. Although that could be quite a liberating thought, even, couldn't it?
Wow, yes. Yes. So we're just going to take a short moment to go into the news, and then we'll return to this conversation afterwards.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishing professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Have you checked out their latest releases? Use the code JCTTR2324 for 20% off your order. Don't miss out. Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
The BBC News channel and news website features an interview with a secondary head teacher 1 year on from an incident in his school which resulted in a lockdown. Head teacher Kieran Stapleton confronted a male who had entered the school building, telling office staff he had a gun. The man has since been detained indefinitely in a secure psychiatric hospital. Mr. Stapleton talks of confronting the man on the corridors while staff followed lockdown procedures, locking classrooms, pulling down blinds and asking pupils to hide under desks and remain calm and silent. Mr. Stapleton used the interview to highlight the issue of mental health and the importance of support for young people in order to avoid instances of violence. He also pointed to the bravery of staff and pupils and the way they responded to the lockdown that was not a drill. The business section of the BBC News site focuses on the impact the post office scandal has had on the children of sub-postmasters. A group set up to support those affected was organised by Katie Downey, whose father was made bankrupt trying to repay money after the Horizon system failed. Ms Downey was 11 when the family moved to France, and she stopped talking for 2 years. She set up the group Lost Chances for the Children of Sub-Postmasters as a way to support those affected, but is also trying to gain compensation for the changed lives. The group has 40 members so far, and many talk of difficult home lives, bullying at school, and feelings of shame after parents were accused. Some also shared experiences of poor mental health, eating disorders, and panic attacks. The group wants members of the public and other groups and agencies to understand how such trauma can affect children and young people. This is so that they are no longer considered as too remote from the harms caused, simply because the harm was not directly inflicted upon them. The holy month of Ramadan began earlier this month, and many schools have made arrangements to support pupils and staff who are fasting. This is something that many schools have done for years, but this year staff shortages have meant that some schools have had to modify their usual procedures. Schools report difficulties in supervising pupils who are fasting in spaces away from food and drink, as they struggle to find additional staff or enough cover for absent staff. One primary school in the east of England resorted to asking parents to take fasting pupils home for the lunch period due to significant staff shortages. Parents expressed frustration at the request, with some quoted by East England News as saying it was insensitive and ridiculous. Some did point out that the school has often been supportive in the past and that it is proud of its multicultural awareness. The school said it was working hard to find a solution to the issue, but could not compromise pupil safeguarding. Difficulties in recruitment, retention and accessing supply staff are an ongoing challenge for many schools. The University of Cambridge is scrapping its state school targets for undergraduate admissions, according to the Telegraph newspaper. The university said it would take candidate schools into account when selecting students, but would no longer have a target for the share of state and private schools pupils gaining places. Cambridge has been accused of discriminating against pupils from private schools amid a decline in offer rates at top independent schools. Vice-Chancellor Deborah Prentice said there is no discrimination, but competition is fiercer as state school pupils have been increasingly encouraged to apply. The targets were originally introduced to increase the portion of state-educated undergraduates from 63.4% to 69.1% by 2024-25. The university has beaten its target with 72.9% of new students in 2022-23 coming from state schools. Finally, a head teacher's letter to parents on the subject of poor quality school meals has gone viral. The letter was sent after issues with the school's catering provider, Chartwell's, led to complaints from pupils over quality and portion sizes. In the letter, the head teacher says he would be exceptionally unhappy if his own children were served the food, and asks, how difficult is it to bake a potato? Whilst the letter focuses on issues with food service, it has highlighted the problems schools face around private finance initiative contract management, funding issues and the impact inflation has had on the food prices, which have left some companies struggling. Some commentators have also raised the issue of the impact poor quality meals can have on pupils who receive free school meals. It's not the first time Chartwell's has been in the news, as the issue of food quality was raised during the pandemic, when the company was accused of providing poor quality food parcels to families during school closures. Chartwell's said it was working with the school to rectify issues and acknowledged that the service had fallen well below the high standards we demand. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
So thank you and welcome back. Welcome back, Matt.
I'm still here.
Yeah, good. Just checking.
Yep.
Brilliant. Before the news, we were sort of talking about neurodiversity, and I think probably listeners will agree there is just so much to talk about in the topic. Within the topic, so I thought it might be good to talk about some of the strengths and some of the needs, and where we can go with that. So I know you talked so brilliantly about it, and I know that you've said before, sometimes people say the neurodiversity is a superpower. I know that you had some thoughts around that. What particular one?
You know what? I guess there are elements of superpowers inside neurodiversity, but it gets me a little bit agitated when I hear that word. I've used too freely with neurodiversity because obviously there's a lot of challenges that people experiences, with their journey, because of the world being created primarily for neurotypical people, and so I do get a little bit sort of it gets me up a little bit when I hear superpowers. Albeit I know some people like to refer to their experiences and their own experience through neurodiversity as being something that they deem to be a superpower. But there are many different positive things that we can see in there as well.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. I think it's the same with any wording, isn't it? Some of it's going to come down to individual preference and experiences. And I'm the same. I can see, if you were supporting or educating a child who's been diagnosed, it probably is helpful to frame it, in a very positive way. But I do agree as well. You sort of have to be a bit careful of when people have had a great deal of distress because of it. It depends what place they're in, isn't it? I mean, I think, if someone had said, "Oh, well, it's a superpower," I'd thought, well, it doesn't feel like one right now.
No, and I think the best example of recent times of a neurodiversity showing itself, publicly was Lewis Capaldi at Glastonbury last year.
Absolutely.
I don't think he would ever look at that as a superpower. I think everybody, of course, the audience and the crowd around were very supportive, and that was, commendable. But that's not superpower, is it? You're seeing absolutely somebody who is struggling with that peaking anxiety, that underlying, his Tourette's sort of showed itself, very, very evidently, didn't it?
It did, and
Yeah.
I mean, you're right. He's an excellent example of that,
Yeah.
and of talking about it as well, and what
Yeah.
he just did incredible things to raise awareness, isn't people's awareness, because
Yeah.
quite often people don't know, do they? I mean, there was a thing I was reading the other day that was saying, people with neurodiversity and disabilities and things like that, 80% are not visible, are
Yeah.
not, immediately apparent, perhaps.
Mm. Yeah, and it's interesting, but that comes down to that thing around, how much we're willing to share with others the experiences and the journeys, and also the construction of society has a big part to play in that, of course, as well. The
Yeah.
way that we look at, and you and I have talked many times about this in different environments, and the reality is the workplaces of today, struggle to cater really for people with neurodiversity in the best way. So,
Mm.
and what does that mean in terms of sort of the powers or the strengths of people with neurodiversity? Well, when and I'll give my example for everybody that's listening.
Mm.
Although, as I said earlier, just with that caveat, I don't have a diagnosis of ADHD. I can definitely see and feel. That's
Mm.
probably the best way to put it. I can definitely feel when I'm going into a period of hyperactivity.
Yeah.
So I know when my brain's going, right, let's go. And the example that I always share, and it's a real example, is I can wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and my brain's going, come on, let's get up, let's get on. Right.
Mhm.
And I'm a morning person. I get up early every day, and I don't always run every day, but I try to do some level of activity to sort of boost the dopamine and to reduce the cortisol and get my stress levels down and improve my mood. But what is important is I now understand that when my brain says let's go, if I hold it back, I'm holding back the horses. They're in the cage, or they're at the start line, but they're not ready to run. And
Yeah.
I've got to run. And I use an analogy of working on the ocean, and in the sense of I go surfing every day. And some days there's brilliant waves. I surf the wave. I enjoy the wave. I love riding on the waves. And some days it's flat. There's nothing. And when
Mm.
it's flat and there's nothing, I'm pretty useless in terms of delivering too much, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But that's the hyperactivity awareness. And when you know it's coming and when you feel the surge, it's like, well, just go with it, ride that wave. But
That's
then
really interesting. That's really interesting. I love that analogy as well. But it's and I guess it's the other way, isn't it? If you know that's how you're feeling,
mm,
then again, I mean, it's that sort of protecting yourself from burnout.
yes,
So that's the other side of it, isn't it? It's like,
mm,
yes, I'm at my most productive, but also, I
yeah,
guess, when you feel that the flat water, no
yeah.
waves,
Well,
it's
that
after
can
you.
happen straight after the wave, right? So the wave comes, and so that 5 a.m. and that's really happened, and I mean that as an example that's true. It's I start at 5, and I'm by
Mm.
8, 9 o'clock in the morning. I've probably done about 8 hours work,
Mhm.
right? Because that's what happens. I just
Yep.
literally get 100% focused in the zone. I usually put on something like binaural beats for anybody that's listening. They're really useful for sort of focus, concentration. They work
Yeah.
on sound waves to help you to sort of really tune in your brain into sort of one topic or one thing, and I can do all those hours work. But then what happens after that, of course, is I'm tired. So
Yeah.
I've been known to have a power nap at 9 o'clock in the morning because my brain's going, I need a rest, I need a rest, and then I'll get on at 10 o'clock and do a training or do something with a client or whoever I'm working with that day, and I'll be alert, and I'll be back into the rhythm of work again. But that's where this thing links into the workday construction. Because if you're a 9 to 5 worker, you don't have the ability to do that.
Absolutely, that's so true, and that it ties into something a course I did quite a while ago now. So I'm just sort of reaching back in my memory, but it was all about personal effectiveness, and a lot
Mm,
of that was about not so much kind of time management, but it was about working out when are your peaks. When are you
yeah.
most active? When are you most effective? And it might be. I mean, I'm also a morning person. I'm a 5:15 a.m.
Brilliant.
And I know I'm very productive in the morning, but not in the evening. Absolutely not in the evening. No, I can't. I don't do anything.
Yeah,
um,
same.
it's about having the flexibility, isn't it, to work to the hours
Yep.
that you are in those cycles. And like
Yeah.
you said, I guess if you're in a very kind of traditional, I suppose, 9 to 5. that's not always going to work for people.
Yeah, it's true, isn't it? And that's the construction of the workplace that we've seen traditionally, isn't it? And
Mm,
and then if you start to think about just bringing in an alternative perspective, different topic, people with 0 hour contracts, people who don't know how many hours they're going to work every week, those people who have the sort of it's not a rigid scheme, and then start to think about that autism piece again. When I was talking about my daughter's experiences, one of the reasons why she started developing challenges in her last year of education was primarily because of all the changes that she was going through. So
yeah.
she was losing control of everything in her environment, sitting all these exams, going to college. What are you going to study? What do you want to be when you're older? What topics do you want to cover? Do you want to learn to drive? Do you want to have a partner, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever it might be? But
Mm,
she was losing control of everything, and it was all about others asking her to make decisions now, whereas before she'd gone through a school system where pretty much everything was set in stone. So,
yeah.
so looking at that in terms of sort of the workplace, of course, this is what I see for the future of the workplace. And I think some organisations already do this quite well. Is looking at those strengths and thinking about, okay, so if we can get somebody with hyper focus on tasks that need hyper focus and key details attention, surely that's better than trying to recruit somebody who part of their job is hyper focusing on details and attention, and some of it's doing a presentation perhaps.
Yes.
So we've got all these wonderful job descriptions. I was talking about managers, and the biggest frustration of managers or leaders is I've got 10 people doing the same job and they all do it differently. Why?
Mm,
Unless you're on a construction line specifically doing elements, if you're all doing the same job in a workplace environment, everybody's slightly different in what they do, how they do it, how they interpret it, which is absolutely normal, but it's also a frustration because
yeah.
performance is different, productivity is different, and so on. So yeah, we've got to craft out parts of jobs, because what is it that clients or businesses are looking for in the future? Well, they want people who get the job done, definitely. They want new ideas and creativity. They want innovative thinking, because these are all things that are lacking in certain areas of businesses today. They want
Mm,
good detail in processing. Those are the sort of top 4 or 5 topics that businesses crave. If we didn't have people who were neurodiverse, we wouldn't have half of the products and things that we have today in this world.
that's it.
And that's the reality of neurodiversity. So the strength is stuff that neurodiverse people bring, but are they given the opportunities to come into organizations in the future? And you and I have had this conversation many times, and it's that challenge, isn't it? So we've
It,
got great skills, not enough people buying into the strength.
no, exactly. But there is in some of the sort of reading and so on that I've been doing around this. There's some absolutely fantastic statistics
Mm,
um, on kind of the benefits. Um, what of the benefits for businesses.
yeah,
And it's something like, the morale. If you're thinking of a staff team, a business that employs people with neurodiversity or SEND or
mm,
anything like that, the actual staff morale of an organisation is increased.
yep,
The statistics, it's something like 72%. I think that was research by Mencap. But also, it's about, if we're thinking about businesses and stuff, it's about your customer and your clients as well, because
yeah,
they've now said, 87% of customers would rather give their custom to organisations who hire a diverse workforce,
yeah.
and that goes up to sort of 92% in some areas.
Mm,
So I mean, for workplaces, not only, if we go with this strength based employment, or strength-based education.
yeah, I like that. Yep,
Yeah,
yep,
then, there's all those benefits to the kind of the creativity and, like you said, the innovative thinking and
yep.
probably half the, oh, I don't know, half the inventions of the world might not have come about
But they
otherwise.
wouldn't. They wouldn't. They genuinely wouldn't. Well, think about sort of the most recent people in history who, to have neurodiversity, Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, Einstein, all these. I know Einstein's not recent history, but, all these people, Bill Gates, and so on, they all had neurodiversity. Richard Branson, so without them, where would the world be in terms of business?
Yeah.
They've broken ground in different areas, and they've created an alternative perspective which has helped so many people.
Yes,
You know,
absolutely. Yeah. If we had all of that, and then you've got the benefits as well, kind of, to the business in terms of finance and sales and
yeah,
productivity.
yeah,
They also released, which I just think is just so thought-provoking. So the National Audit Office has estimated that if every young person, whether it's somebody with neurodiversity or learning disability or any other needs, if they are given and supported with relevant life and employability skills that enable them to live sort of semi-independently, you can save £1 million of lifetime costs for every
wow,
young person.
wow.
Like, that's just mind blowing.
Yeah,
Which is why I think I'm so, I just am so passionate about getting people to think about these kind of things, because I mean, if you really want to get it down to, not morals or ethics or societal messages, but pure finances, it makes
yeah.
sense.
Well, that talks to businesses, doesn't it? And it's one of
Yeah,
those that it's exactly the same with the ROI on investing in things like mental health in the workplace. What is it, £5 for every pound invested? As a return, and you're thinking, why wouldn't you do that? If you had some money to invest in something, and they said, well, I can return you 5 times your investment, wouldn't you invest it? I would. I definitely would. And I think I'm a pretty decent business person, but I think that's sort of a simple maths equation that works for anybody, isn't it?
exactly. I mean, it just sounds like a sure thing to me.
Oh yeah, and there is no such thing in life as a sure thing, but that is sort of almost the certainty of, and it's that investment, isn't it? It's that relationship with making sure that we can get the best out of people. I found it frustrating for many years. I worked in the corporate world, and always the sales patter was always around the people, right? The people. So what's your biggest? What's the best asset? Well, we have the best people, and I always was challenged with that, because I think there's a very difficult way to it's impossible to measure that, isn't it? Do we really have the best people? So if we've got all of the best people doing the job, then where are the second best people? So
Yeah.
they're in the competition. So almost all we were doing is a marketing thing of, well, the competition have got the second best people, we've got all the best ones. And then I thought, actually, there's a different way to look at this, isn't there? And that comes down to that perspective. And I tried to change that with the organisation I was with at the time. And I said, let's stop saying we have the best people. Let's start saying we do the best with the people we have.
Yeah.
So we invest in them, we support them, we enable them, and it links into another topic that is becoming much more prevalent this year. And I do believe that. And it does link into neurodiversity, of course, and that's around psychological safety. So,
Yes.
not only are we bringing people in who might need extra help and support, but we're also creating an environment where psychological safety is absolutely in the foundations.
Yeah.
Everybody's safe to be able to talk openly. Everybody's allowed to be who they are. We just recently on the 12th of March had mental health first aids, My Whole Self Day, which is an important recognition of, we should be allowed to come to work and be ourselves. We shouldn't have to come to work and pretend who we are and what we're going through. And it's all perfect. Madagascar penguins smile and wave. It's that we just have to be real about who we are and how we work.
Absolutely agree. So we're just going to hear from our sponsors for one more time, and then we'll come back and just do some sort of, I guess, roundup and key messages, and so on.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishing professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Have you checked out their latest releases? Use the code JCTTR2324 for 20% off your order. Don't miss out. Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading.
Yeah, just wanted to say, that code for John Catt is fantastic, and they really do have an amazing range of books and resources and so on. So yeah, I need to get on there myself again. So we were just going to finish up. Really, I knew that this was going to go quite rapidly, because one, we can talk for ages about this, and two, it's a huge subject, isn't it?
Yeah.
So if you were to, if someone was to say at the end of this, what would you want someone who's listened to take away from this?
Well, even that's a big question, isn't it? I think the simplistic thought here is to say, look, firstly, every single one of us has our own differences. We're all unique, whether we have underlying neurodiversity, whether we have mental health challenges or experiences, whatever it is we're going through, is our journey. And I think that's really, really important for everybody to recognize. You don't have to be neurodiverse to support neurodiversity.
Yeah.
You just have to be open to accepting it and acknowledging we might need to change some of the things for people. I think secondly, for me, what's really important, and as I said in the session, is that thing about taking notice, that self-awareness and that self-reflection, because I think that's where a lot of people do struggle, because we're often reaching to others to find the answers to the questions for us. Sometimes we've got to seek inside, and that's why I love what I do. I do genuinely everything I do outside of my life in my house, albeit I bring all of that into my world. It's helping people to say, look, take notice of what's going on for you, because you're the one in control. You're the commander of your own ship. You've got to think about driving, looking after yourself better, or looking after yourself well in the future. And if there are things that you feel, I don't understand why I feel this way about it, then reach out and get some help and support. And I think that's half the challenge, is acknowledging something's not going well for us. Yeah, I don't know. Those would be my sort of thoughts. Self-awareness, self-reflection. Obviously, self-care is a big part of that too. And I just strongly encourage everybody to say, look, max out on the self-care as much as you can. Self-care is a necessity and not a luxury. It's something that we all need anyway. It's such a busy world that we work and live in today that taking time for ourselves is paramount. We have to do it. Those quiet spaces, Marie, that we're all designing for offices and wherever people go, make sure you use them, because they are for quiet space, not for taking calls, not for doing emails. They're just for sometimes being present and in that moment, aren't they?
Yeah, I was reading something at the weekend, and it was saying, if you can just prioritize yourself for less than an hour, a day, half an hour, just something, or find your ways to to de-escalate and to decompress and to process, because you deserve it. But we do, I know a lot of us have this weird sort of, I don't know, reluctance or guilt about doing that. But I mean, ultimately, if you don't look after yourself, you're just sort of heading for, like we said, burnout or mental health, or physical health even, but just taking that time, just a bit of time every day in whatever way helps you. I know you've said, running helps you. I like swimming, but even just 10 minutes of quiet, isn't it? It's going to help.
One of my favourite quotes, sorry, Marie, to cut there, is one of my favourite quotes is Cecilia Tran said, self-care means giving yourself permission to pause.
Yes.
And I love that.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I love that as well, actually. That is permission. Yeah, which is funny, isn't it? But I think that's just the way that we all are at the moment.
Yeah, I don't have time, and it's one of my pet projects is around time, and it's that we're driven crazy by time, and we run out of time too quickly, like this, we're running out of time, and we're all driven by these numbers that run around the clock every day, and we chase them every day, and every day they reset back to zero and we start again.
Yeah, and it's just like you said, just a race.
It's a race, yeah. So what time's your lunch? What time are we going out? What time are we getting up? What time are you going to bed? Everything's so dictated by time, and it's such a shame because, we try, and I try to impose it or sort of implement that with my daughters around. It doesn't matter how long it takes. It's more about taking steps forward. That's the key, isn't it?
Yes, exactly, and it might not be linear.
No, oh gosh, no.
No, almost certainly isn't.
It never is. Yeah, it never is. You think you've climbed the mountain and then you slide down the other side. I'd rather take a very slow, gentle sort of gondola back to the other side, rather than just sliding headfirst down the mountain, which sometimes is what it feels like.
Yes, yeah. So last week actually was at a really amazing conference. It was all about inclusive inclusivity and inclusive education. And it was all the key messages at the end. I mean, it was a very powerful wrap up at the end of the 3 days. And it was basically, the messages are that inclusive education is a human right.
Yeah.
But actually, the way our system is at the moment is it's incredibly competitive. It's very standardised. It's a lot of teaching to the qualifications. But diversity is not seen positively. It's everybody kind of needs to be the same, and it all needs to be standardised.
Yep.
But actually, they were saying, this their thing for their goal for 2030 is it all means all. And and again, they've said right at the end, really, I was like, wow. They said, education can save the world,
Yep.
but we need to save education first. And it was, like I said, it was an incredibly powerful statement. And I think it ties into all this motivation. I know that we have, and I'm sure lots of the listeners are sharing this, this motivation to be inclusive, to understand neurodiversity, and to acknowledge it and work towards a world where these benefits are for everyone.
Yeah. And it's the future, isn't it? And I just, I really believe, Marie, and I say it openly, and I want people to realise and appreciate that it's, we want to clear the path for our children in the future to have every opportunity, not to be disadvantaged because of having neurodiversity or mental health challenges. And that's my sort of life drive now, is to clear the path for my girls, and so they're never disadvantaged by a system that says, we're really sorry, but you've been through this experience, or we're really sorry, but you have this. And I'd hate to see that in the future, and I know it happens, and I know people are disadvantaged, and the statistics around people with neurodiversity in the workplace is very, very challenging, in terms of, if you look at the difference, and just very quickly in the summary thought, because I know we're just coming to the end, but the difference between people with physical disabilities employed versus people with neurodiversity challenges who are unemployed, there's a big disparity still between those as well. It's hard. And like you said earlier, you can't see a lot of the neurodiversities, but, we need to learn about them, and that's it. And as I said, my education started on the 15th of January 2016, when everything went wrong for me. And then I woke up one day and said, you know what, I need to go back to school here. I'm an adult, I'm grown up. And I think that's where a lot of people are struggling now, because they're not realising until they have to, that they need to do it.
Yeah, like your quote, you know what you need. What was it? You know what you need to...
It's a tongue twister. You have to say it 10 times really quickly. You only know what you need to know when you know that you need to know it.
Absolutely that.
There you go. I'm copywriting that one, by the way. That's mine.
What an amazing message to finish on. So, for anyone listening, thank you for joining us. If you're listening back after, I'd still love to know your thoughts and reflections on this. Over on Teachers Talk Radio, on Podbean, it'll be on Spotify, and obviously you can find me on X. But Matt, thank you so much. Are you going to go and have a power nap now?
No, I'm energized now, because I've always genuinely loved talking to you, Marie. You know that, so I'm energized. My dopamine levels are really high, so I'm feeling good. I feel ready for the next thing. And that communication I got before this session, I'm over that now, which is good. So I've managed to put that to rest, put that to peace. So I'm in a good place now.
Excellent. Well, I hope you have an amazing rest of the day, and thank you so much. And always, as always, really lovely to talk to you.
Oh, you're welcome. No worries.
All right. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.